So far, we have created a first Maven project and it is working fine. Let's assume that I'm a developer and I would like to give this code to the DevOps engineer. Now it's time to push this code into the source code management or version control system so that if there is any changes I do for this code, it should not affect the working code, as well as I can share this one to the my DevOps engineer so that he can able to deploy into the target environment. But I don't need to give all these dependency packages or some libraries which is required to build this project. Why? Because that is already explained in my pom.xml, and I will give the source code and the unit test cases. So if I give these three, that would be sufficient for him to test or build the code again in his own environment. So to do this one, we need to push this code into the version control system. In our case, we are going to push it into the GitHub. Now I am going to create a repository in the GitHub and will push this code onto remote repository. From there, I will act as a DevOps engineer. For that, let's jump into our GitHub account. This is my GitHub account. I'm going to create a new repository, and repository name I'm giving it as a package name, that is, so I'm giving first demo project. Okay, same name as our package name I'm giving, and we can make it as a private in case if it is having a proprietary data or confidential project. In our case, we don't have such kind of data, so we'll go with the public so that we can easily manage it. But usually we don't create public repositories in the organizations until unless there is no such valuable content. Most of the cases we go with the private repositories. And I'm not creating any files. We may need the .ignore file, I will tell you. Let's create without doing anything. So now we have created a repository. Here we have options in case we have created repository and we want to add few files, and so far we haven't created any files. We can follow these steps, but we have already created a project and we want to push that code over here. In that case, we need to do this one. Okay, but before doing this one, we need to convert our project folder as a Git repository. So that will become a local repository and this will become a remote repository. We can able to establish connection between these two. If you are not able to understand what I am talking, maybe it's time for you to go with some of the Git courses. If you wish, I have a separate course on Git, that is Git and GitHub for DevOps engineers. It will be definitely add value for your DevOps journey. Maybe you can check out that. So I'm opening my Java application folder. So this is where we are storing our application, right? That is under Galaxy projects first demo project. Now we would like to convert this one into the local repository, and this is remote repository, and this command helps us to enable connection between the local to remote. For that, we just need to right click over here and you can see a option called git bash here. Just click on this one. If you are not getting that option, maybe you haven't installed git bash. If you don't know how to do that one, I have added a separate lecture for that one at the end of this course. Maybe you can refer to that. I'm just increasing the font size, and we need to convert this one into a local repository first. For that, git init dot. Okay, so even this command also works when you install the git bash, otherwise it doesn't work. Now it has been converted into the git repository. That's the reason earlier there is no master over here. Now you can see the master at the end of this repository. Anyway, if I do ls, you can see the list of the files whatever you could able to see without dots. If you want to see the files which are with dots, then you need to do ls minus la. So A helps us to display the hidden files. So .git directory has been created just now, and even settings file, projects file, everything is there. All right. So let's clear it and ls. Now what I'm going to do is I want to extract a target directory. Why? Because as a DevOps engineer, he just need the source code, like which is containing the application logic as well as test cases, and pom.xml which have the all the information to build this application. So target is containing the code which is comes out of the build process, right? That is the reason you can see the class files and jar files, all this stuff. Okay, these all are not needed while pushing your code. For that, we are going to use a file called gitignore. Okay, vi.gitignore. This file helps us to exclude some of the unnecessary folders which we don't want to push it into the remote repository. In this case, we don't want to push the target directory, right? So let's open and target/star, which means that the data which contains in the target directory, everything should be ignored. So all right, let's save this file. Now it's time for us to push this code onto the remote repository. Before that, if I check git status now, you can see it is pulling or pushing the code only .git ignore. Apart from .ignore, we don't need all this stuff. So I'm going to edit my .git ignore file again. So I will add those as well. Class path dot settings. Okay, these all are files. I will just have a look over here. Okay, I have added everything. Now if I do git status, okay, you can see only .git ignore file, pom.xml and src. Only this information we are going to adding to our local repository. So to add it to the local repository, git add dot, it is going to add the content into the local repository, and git commit -m added initial commit. It is asking for me to add username and password. I will quickly add it. Git user add. Okay, I'm adding the username. Similar way, sorry, that is email ID. I'm going to add the username. All right, now I can able to commit the changes into the local repository. So this is going to commit into the local repository. Again, if I check for git status, okay, nothing is there in the local repository. Now it's time to add our remote repository. Okay, so to add remote repository, this is the command. So I'm just adding this command to our repository. So our local repository get associated with the remote repository. Now we are going to push our code onto remote repository. Git push -u origin main or master, because by default on the remote repository it creates the main. So I'm going to use the master. Even we can use the main branch. So it is going to push our code onto remote repository, and it will ask for the credentials. We should provide those. Sorry, I just cancelled it. Again, I'm going to execute it. It should ask for the credentials. Okay, here you can see I'm going to use the sign in with the browser. I have credentials. Usually it should prompt over here itself. Anyway, I'm going to use ravd and password. It will store the credentials in the credential format. Authorize the git, and it should able to push the code over there. Right, so I have successfully pushed my code into the remote repository, and if I refresh here, you can see here there is a branch called master. I have successfully able to push the content, that is src and pom.xml. These two files are sufficient to build the code. Now I can say that as a developer I have pushed my code, and now DevOps engineer is going to use this code. Again, he will use the Maven in his environment to build this code. How does it happen? We are going to see in the next section. Thanks for watching and see you there.